great pleasure being here. Thank you for coming so numerous. So do I assume right that most of you can understand English?
Yeah.
Of course. Okay. Well, I'm here to talk about Revita Blue, as I'm sure you have guessed. Revita Blue is all about stem cells. So to understand what Revita Blue does and what it can do for you, it's good to understand what stem cells are, what they do. There's a lot of interest, as I'm sure you know, a lot of interest about stem cells today in science. You can see it in magazines, on the internet, in the news. And the reason why so many scientists are interested about stem cells, adult stem cells, is because of this global recognition that adult stem cells have enormous regenerative potential. They can repair tissues. That's why there's so much interest in stem cells. The thing that is virtually never talked about is that while there is all this interest about stem cells, you have stem cells since the day you are born in your bone marrow, in your bloodstream, in virtually all the organs and tissues in your body. So if stem cells have such enormous potential, then what about the stem cells in your body? What is the natural role of stem cells in the body? And when we answer that question, I think it's giving us a novel understanding of health and wellness, and I even believe that it's giving us a novel understanding of disease formation, and it's going to change the way that we practice medicine. So I'm going in this presentation give you sort of the scientific information to back what I'm telling you right now. And I was told that Chinese people like a lot of details, so I'm going to give you a lot of details today. I hope it's okay. Good? Okay. So first, let's start by defining what is a stem cell. The best way to define a stem cell is to first talk about what is not a stem cell in your body. All the cells of your body are referred to as somatic cells. They are cells that are specialized, they do one specific thing, they will never multiply, and they will never transform into anything else. You take a cell of your muscle, a cell of your pancreas, a cell of your lung, they all do something very specific which make them cells of that specific tissue. They will never transform. At the other end of the spectrum, you have stem cells. Stem cells are actually nothing. What I mean by this is that in your body, stem cells do not play any role as a stem cell. Their role is in their ability to transform into a cell that will do something. And traditionally, stem cells have always been known to be the precursors to blood cells. If there's anybody here that has studied in biology, in medicine, even today in med school, what you will be told is that stem cells are precursors to blood cells, and that's it. They don't do anything else in your body. And yet there's a whole body of research telling us something different. Early 2000, the first studies in this field started to emerge in the scientific literature, documenting that stem cells, yes, they can become blood cells, but they also have the ability of becoming, the first documentation, they can become heart cells, they can become brain cells, liver cells. Let me show you one of these studies. I could show you hundreds of studies to show this, but this study is very interesting for one reason, and we'll come to that in a few minutes. So here's a study in which scientists took a double beaker, so a small beaker, put into a bigger beaker, and the liquid here goes through both beakers. At the bottom here, there is a semi-permeable membrane, so it has holes that are big enough to allow the passage of molecule, but too small to allow the passage of cells. At the top, they put stem cells. At the bottom, they put a piece of damaged liver. And then they waited. And after 8 hours, you can see the stem cells transforming into liver cells. Now, the way in science to identify a cell is you look at it under the microscope, and they will all have cells of different tissues, will have different shapes, different colors, different nuclei, nucleus organelles inside the cell. So with visible characteristics, a pathologist can identify every kind of types of cells. But it's impossible to say this liver cell was a stem cell yesterday. The transformation is completely invisible, and that's the reason why it has never been seen until the development, and this started probably about 30 years ago, the development of a whole new class of compounds generally referred to as markers, To make an analogy, it's a little bit like, how did we discover that geese can fly over thousands of kilometers when we started to tag them with a GPS? Same thing, we discovered whales could swim at depth that we never thought they could once we started to tag them with GPS and those kinds of devices. The GPS for a cell that was developed is a protein called green fluorescent protein. It has been developed over the past 40, 50 years, but in 2008, it received the Nobel Prize in Chemistry, and it is a protein that is extracted from a jellyfish, and it is spontaneously fluorescent. So you just put light on it, you may have seen some of them in the ocean, you just put light and they start to glow. Given that it's a protein, we can derive the DNA that codes for this protein. Once we have the DNA, we can inject the DNA in the nucleus of a stem cell. So now that stem cell will make this protein. So all you have to do, you put a bright light on that cell and it will glow. But if that stem cell becomes a population of liver cells, you can look at them under the microscope, identify them as liver cell, but the moment you put a light on it, they start to glow. Now you can tell these liver cells were stem cells the day before. So it gives a means to suddenly reveal a phenomenon that had always been there but was never seen. So here's what a lot of scientists did. Irradiation of mice, which kill all the stem cells, injection of fluorescent stem cells, trigger an injury to a tissue, and then we observe the process of tissue repair. Here's a study in mice in which a toxin called cardiotoxin was injected into the leg of a mouse, and it kills the muscle. And then 6 weeks later, you can see the muscle entirely reconstituted, but it is green, meaning that the repair of that muscle that normally we would have believed before is just the muscle that is sort of repairing itself. No, it actually came from the bone marrow. If you trigger a heart attack, the area of the heart that repairs is full of green cells. Same thing in the skin after a burn of the skin. Same thing in the kidney. Same thing in the lung. Same thing in the pancreas. We'll come back to that later, showing that stem cells from the bone marrow can go to the pancreas and become pancreatic cells. Now, early 2000, when the first observation of this were being made, like the observation that a stem cell from the bone marrow can become a brain cell. It's a little bit like the first time that a biologist observed a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. The first time that this observation is made, you can draw two conclusions. You can be a conservative scientist and say, that was a weird caterpillar. We've got to study other caterpillars. Or you could be a little bit more daring scientist and say, nature is organized. If that caterpillar became a butterfly, it looks like butterflies come from caterpillars. So on the basis of this early observation, we published an article in the journal Medical Hypotheses in which we proposed if stem cells can become brain cells, heart cells, and liver cells, the early observation, then they've got to be able to become lung cells, pancreatic cells, and all the rest as well. And if they can become all the cells of the body, then it has to be the body's repair system. It was just an idea back then, but if we fast forward 16, 17 years later, now it is a very, very well documented process in the body, very well accepted. Your stem cells, just like you have an immune system, you have a repair system. And here's how it works. Anytime, hundreds and hundreds of studies backing various aspects of this whole process. This is very well documented. Anytime you have an injury, a wound, anything that is not functioning properly somewhere in the body, the affected area will release very specific compounds that are very well known today. These compounds will go to the bone marrow, trigger the release of stem cells from the bone marrow, and stem cells will enter into the bloodstream. Within 3 to 4 days after an injury, within 3 to 4 days after an injury, the number of stem cells in circulation will increase between 3 to 10 times. It's a natural process. Now, these stem cells are circulating everywhere in the body. They don't know what is the tissue that needs repair, that is calling for assistance. So what happens is that on the second day after an injury, the affected tissue starts to release another compound. So as stem cells are circulating everywhere in the body, when they pass in the defined blood vessels of the affected tissue, locally this compound is showing up, and it's touching the membrane of stem cells, and it triggers the ability of stem cells to migrate out of the blood circulation through the capillary wall into the tissue. When the stem cells arrive at the tissue, it will keep seeing where the injury is and will crawl to the site of the injury, and upon contact with cellular debris of that tissue, stem cells will multiply and become cells of that tissue. Isn't this beautiful?
Yes.
Just like you have an infection. You cut yourself, you get a bacteria that get into your cut, and what happens is that you will release immune cells from your lymph nodes that will go everywhere in your body, but they won't go into your ear or your nose. Where do they go? They go in your finger, because that's where you've got the infection. They're specifically attracted to go where the injury is. They will go beside the bacteria, and understand that for an immune cell to find a bacteria somewhere in your body, it's like you walking and wandering and suddenly, randomly meeting a friend in Tokyo. It won't happen if it's not organized. So an immune cell going beside the bacteria and killing that bacteria is a highly organized process in the body. This is exactly the same thing. This is a highly organized system and process that will lead stem cells to the area where you need repair, and they will execute repair. In this whole process, you've got various steps: the release of stem cells, their circulation, their migration, and then their proliferation and differentiation. But of all these steps, the step that has been the most studied is the release of stem cells from the bone marrow, because we know these compounds known to release stem cells, so we can inject them in animals or in people. So we trigger the release, and then people have studied the link between the number of stem cells in circulation and health. So let's talk about what is that relationship. And here I will go through a number of studies. I'm just choosing, there are hundreds of studies. I'm choosing those that illustrate the process so that you can understand it and you can see that what I'm telling you here is really science-based. That's all that I want to share with these studies. So the first conclusion: more stem cells in circulation means that more stem cells are available to participate to the process of tissue repair. In other words, you get two people with the same problem, a broken bone, for example, and you've noticed this in your life, with your kids, with yourself, your friends. We don't all repair and heal at the same speed. You got two people with the same problem, and somebody it's lingering, and somebody else in 2 weeks, they're fine. So one of the difference is how many stem cells you have in circulation. Here's a study in which scientists counted the number of stem cells in people who had a heart attack, separated these people into groups. One group, people who recovered very quickly and resumed an active life. The other group, people who were hospitalized, did not do very well, or even passed away. If you count the number of stem cells, people who had a poor outcome had about half the number of stem cells in circulation compared to the people who had a better outcome. So forget the disease here, forget the heart attack, just think health and how the body functions. It simply means when something happens, if you've got more stem cells, you just have a tendency to repair better. Which leads to the second question in conclusion: if more stem cell is better, then if I do put more stem cells in circulation, if there's a means of increasing the number of stem cells in circulation, can I assist the body in this process of tissue repair? So here I just want to put what I'm going to talk about into the context of what you already know, or what you may already have read in the media, on the internet. When we talk about stem cell treatments, and I want to be sure here, very clear, I am not telling you Revita-Blue is a stem cell treatment. I want to explain to you how the body works, and in order to facilitate that understanding, I want to position this information within the context of what you already know, what you've already read in the scientific literature. When we talk about using stem cells, we talk about isolating them from a source, which can be umbilical cord, fat tissue, blood, dental pulp. There are various sources of stem cells. Then we may or may not manipulate them in the lab. They used to be manipulated. They're less and less manipulated. And then we inject them into your bloodstream. So what we do is that we increase the number of stem cells in circulation through an injection. So it begs the question, once we discovered that this is your natural repair system, and there are ways to enhance the release of stem cells, it begs the question, what can we achieve by releasing our own stem cells, which is called endogenous stem cell mobilization, the release of your own stem cells. So I'm going to share with you studies, again, just a few, but studies that illustrates, and that's really the conclusion. Forget the disease here. The point is to illustrate what your body can do with these stem cells. Naturally, this is what your body is designed to do. You're born that way. So let's look at the heart. Here's a study in which it was done by the National Institutes of Health. Here's a study in which scientists stopped the blood flow to the heart in mice, which triggers a heart attack, let the animal recover, and then separate these animals into a group, control group, and then experimental group, in which all they did, they injected these compounds that trigger stem cell release from the bone marrow. So the difference between these two groups, this group, nothing was done. The experimental group, more stem cells were put in circulation. Lots more. We're talking 5 to 10 times baseline level. So far, so good?
Yeah.
Okay. So when they looked at these animals 27 days later, this is a month, okay? In the control group, severe scar tissue in the ventricular wall, no new blood vessels, 17% survival, and poor cardiovascular function. In the group that had more stem cells, we see renewal of the ventricular wall, functional new blood vessels, 73% survival, and almost completely normalized cardiovascular function. So in a world where there's nothing we can do to recover from a heart attack, here's a study published 18 years ago that is showing that if you can put more stem cells in circulation, your body has the ability of using them for tissue repair, at least in the heart for this study. It's one of many studies. Here's another one now touching the endocrine system. Again, I'm just picking a few that you can relate to because heart problem, diabetes, this is things that you know about, you've heard about it. So if I am to show that stem cells in your body can play a role into changing the course of something like pancreatic function or diabetes, I need to show two things. I need to show that naturally, without doing anything, stem cells from your bone marrow can release themselves from the bone marrow, go to the pancreas, and become insulin-producing cells in the pancreas. I have to show that this is a natural function of your body. Once I have showed this, the next step is to show that if I can put more stem cells in circulation, I can enhance this natural process to a point where it could change the course of diabetes. Good enough?
Good.
Okay, first study. Very ingenious study. I mean, the scientists were pretty smart. So they took male mice in which they did a genetic manipulation. They attached the gene for green fluorescent protein to the gene for insulin. So what they do is that when they use the first cell that will make the mouse, so the embryonic stem cells, to that cell, they do this genetic manipulation. And now they let the animal completely develop so that any cell in this animal that makes insulin will also make green fluorescent protein, so it will become green. Good? They take female mice, they irradiate them, so it kills all the stem cells, and then they inject stem cells from these male mice into these female mice. So I have female mice whose entire body is made of cells that do not have the Y chromosome, it's double X. So any cell that has the Y chromosome, I know that it's a stem cell that came from that male mouse. And if any one of them starts to make insulin, I can see it because it will turn green. So a few weeks later, they isolated pancreatic cells in these mice. And if you look at that one cell, it is green. So it has transcribed the gene for insulin. It's in the pancreas. But does it really make insulin? So they use the red dye for insulin, and you can see that that cell actually is making insulin. It is making insulin right between these other two normal cells of the pancreas. My point here is that it's not a sluggish cell, it's not an overactive cell, it's not a Frankenstein cell, it's a very normal cell of the pancreas. And the message, when I'm done with this whole presentation, is for you to understand that today, at the age that we all have, there's not one cell in our pancreas that we're born with. That's what they all went through. They came from your bone marrow, they went to your pancreas, and they are now part of your pancreas. And does it have the Y chromosome? Yes, it does. So it does come from the bone marrow, from the male mice. So conclusion, This study on its own shows very clearly how stem cells from the bone marrow can go to the pancreas and become insulin-producing functional cells of the pancreas. Good enough?
Good.
Next step. Can I enhance, change the course of diabetes by putting more stem cells in circulation? When scientists study diseases, if you try to go and find a diabetic mouse, you won't find one. If you want to find a mouse with Alzheimer, a mouse that forgot what a cat is, you won't find one. Parkinson mice, you won't find one. A mouse with multiple sclerosis, muscular dystrophy, you won't find them. You need to find a way to trigger the disease in the animals or something similar to a human disease, and then you try to do something about it. That's the essence of animal research in terms of human diseases. For diabetes, it is a toxin. So here is it's an islet of Langerhans. The name is not relevant. It's the part of your pancreas that is functionally making insulin in your pancreas. This part of your body is very sensitive to a bacterial toxin called streptozotocin, STZ. Forget the name, it's not relevant. Once you inject that toxin in a mouse, this becomes this within 1 or 2 days. These animals now do not make insulin anymore. They are fully diabetic mice. If you don't give them insulin, they will develop all the problem associated to insulin. And now scientists take these mice and they try to repair them, do something to change their condition of diabetic. So in a third group of mice, they injected streptozotocin plus compounds that trigger stem cell release from the bone marrow. And you get a partial reconstitution of these islets of Langerhans, but that level of reconstitution is enough so that these mice are no longer diabetic. A same study was done, a preliminary study was done in humans in Italy, in which they did the same type of approach with 14 persons recently diagnosed with diabetes, and then of the 14, 13 were independent from insulin between 3 to 36 months. I'm not telling you we have a cure for diabetes. I'm telling you your stem cells in your body, as they sit right now in your bone marrow, they're meant to maintain your health. They're designed to do that. That's what they do. And when we give them the chance to do that, that's what they will do in your body. These are just 2 studies to exemplify this whole process. I can show you many more. I'll just stop there. Similar studies touching liver function, lung function, the nervous system, the brain, the spinal cord. We have the same kind of data. Now, out of these 2 conclusions, there's a third one that is emerging, which to me is the most important. And it's the corollary of the first 2. If we say more stem cells in circulation is better, the corollary to this is that if you don't have enough, then you cannot repair as well. So this creates the underlying condition for losing your health and developing problems over time. So let me spend a little bit more time on this one, because when I say this is called to change the way we understand health and wellness, that is what I mean. So in the world today, I'm going to say something that is very, very, very simple. It's probably has never been put into such simple words, but if you just think about it, it's just pure common sense. Today in the world, if we think of the general process of disease formation, it is cellular loss. You lose cells in the heart, you've got cardiomyopathy. You lose cells in the pancreas, you develop diabetes. You lose cells making dopamine in your brain, that's Parkinson. You lose cells making acetylcholine, that's Alzheimer's. You lose cells in your thyroid gland, you have hypothyroidism. Think of any kind of age-related problem, it is always the loss of a type of cell or the function of a type of cell. Good enough? Macular degeneration, your retina, everything. So, the general view in the world today is that we are born, we mature, we reach optimal health at maybe 20, 25 years of age, and then things slowly go down as we lose cells as part of this age-related process. There's a point where we lose enough cells in a tissue, an organ, and we develop the problem associated with that tissue, and then this is when you start to have that problem. Fair enough? It is a little bit like saying, on the day you're born, we're giving you a bank account, a health bank account, that's your genetics, and spend it wisely. And that's your lifestyle. It will tell you when you will run out of money and you'll start to be health bankrupt. But all all these studies on stem cells is showing us something different. While stem cells are participating to tissue repair, what scientists and science in general has documented in hundreds of studies is that stem cells don't only repair what's broken, in the background, they also maintain things that are functioning well. You lose cells every day, you need to replace them every day. So your health is not just a slow decline, it is actually a balance between two processes in the body. It's actually to say, you're not born with a certain bank account and then you just spend it. It's simply that you spend regularly, and as long as you've got a regular income that matches your expense, you're fine. So you lose cells every day, as long as you can replace them, you're fine. When you're young, you have a lot of stem cells. So you see kids, they repair very quickly. But as we age, our red marrow that makes stem cells transform into yellow marrow that does not make stem cells, so we have fewer and fewer stem cells as we age. There's a point when we lose that balance, and then we start to lose more than we can repair. That's when you start to develop problems. You have not developed it yet, but you're on the path of developing them. So what is the difference? What makes somebody develop problems of the brain? Somebody else it's the lungs, somebody else it's the pancreas, somebody else it's the heart. It's a whole slew of factors. Your genetics, your past injuries, your exposure to environmental toxin, your exposure to physical, emotional stress, your ability to deal with them, your ability to rest, your diet, your mother-in-law. All these factors will be the pressure applied on you and your ability to handle it. We've all seen this. You see the same overall life condition. You take twins, with the same condition. But if they have life situations that are different, they evolve differently. So all these factors are different. So to put this into, if I keep with my banking analogy, it's like saying we have somebody who cannot pay for their car, somebody else cannot pay for their house, somebody else cannot pay for their health, somebody else cannot pay for their education. So we have car problem, house problem, education problem, and health problem. But we only have money problem. It's just showing differently in the life of different people. It's the same thing here. There's only one problem. A decline in your ability to maintain tissue. But it shows up differently in the life of different individuals. So there's one way to prove this approach, because it's an idea that emerged maybe like 10 years ago. I wrote for the first time in it around 2013, but it was an idea. The way to prove this would be to go and count the number of stem cells in the bloodstream of people who have developed various kinds of age-related problem, and compare that with the number of stem cells in the bloodstream of healthy people. And if this whole idea is true, what we should see is that people who have developed problems should have fewer stem cells in circulation, right?
Yes.
Okay, let's look at a few of these studies. Now I'm just going quickly through them. The graphs may look a little complex. Just look at the general story here, because the trend that is emerging from this is very clear. So this is the number of stem cells in people that are at various stages of the development of diabetes. Normal glucose tolerance, impaired fasting glucose, impaired glucose tolerance in diabetes. You see a straight line. If we look at kidney problems, this is healthy individual, people who have kidney problem, and people who have increasing level of kidney problem. Not only do we see almost like 1/3 the level of stem cells compared to healthy people, but it's going down as the problem becomes more and more severe. Erectile function. Patients complained of erectile function, normal individuals. We look at the average, a little bit less than half. If we take all these people, we give them a test to establish their international index of erectile function, and we plot this with the number of stem cells, we see a straight line. There's a direct link between erectile function and the number of stem cells. It has all to do with vascular function. And here we have it. People with hypertension, normal people, half the number of stem cells in circulation. People with various level of heart conditions, but when they have fully developed ischemic heart disease, about half the number of stem cells compared to healthy people. Same thing with Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, half the number of stem cells. Same thing with COPD, lung problem. I could continue, arthritis, more. There's more than that in the literature. I'm just showing a few. The general gist here is that there is a link between the number of stem cells in circulation and the ability to just stay healthy. So that's the general conclusion. Having more stem cells in circulation helps your body to repair. I will have about 3 minutes. Is that okay? Okay, I'm out of time. Okay, so here's what we can do about it. And that's the whole introduction, if you want, with Revitablue. Revitablue is a very simple product. It does not cure anything, it does not heal anything, it does not mitigate anything. It does one very simple thing. It supports a natural function of your body, which is to release stem cells. You release stem cells every day. They do this work in your body since the day you are born. We simply support that natural process just like you would support your immune system. So it is made of various ingredients. So I started 20 years ago to work with this blue-green algae. People were reporting a broad variety of health benefits. We could not understand what's the mechanism of action. How can this product lead to benefits to the heart, to the lung, to the liver, to the brain, to various aspects of human health? Until this data started to show up in the scientific literature about stem cells, so we thought, what if this product supports the release of stem cells from the bone marrow? And that's what we discovered. Within an hour of consumption, we see more stem cells in circulation after consumption. So let's skip this one. So we continued to study different plants because it was clear to me that, so basically what that represents is the number of stem cells in circulation relative to baseline after minutes of consumption. So the effect is transient. It lasts for just a few hours, comes back to control, but it's like sending a wave of stem cells to support the natural process of tissue repair in the body. So after discovering what this plant was doing, it was clear to me that there cannot be just one plant having an effect on stem cells. So we kept looking at other plants, and I came across about 2-3 years ago a plant called sea buckthorn berry. You probably know sea buckthorn. It grows well in upper region in China. Actually, this is where it's coming from. Hippophae rhamnoides. It's its Latin name. Hippophae means horse-like, shining horse. It is Alexander the Great traveling in western China during his conquest, and at one point he abandoned a herd of horses wounded in battle. He left them to die in a field of sea buckthorn berry, and when he came back a few weeks later, he had a herd of radiant, healthy horse with a shiny coat, which is a sign of health for a horse. So the berry was called shining horse. And then it incorporated Chinese medicine, Mongolian medicine, Tibetan medicine, where it is used for the lung, for the heart, for the whole cardiovascular system, for the pancreas, for injury. So what it tells me, if we have heart, lung, injuries, pancreas, what is it telling me? It's probably stem cell effect. So we derived an extract, we tested it, and we see a sustained release in the number of stem cells in circulation. The next one is a specific extract of aloe. I won't tell the whole story because we don't have time, but it's a very interesting ingredient. It's not just all aloe. So it's a very unique extract of aloe, and we get, again, the same thing, an increase in the number of stem cells in circulation. So that is basically Revitablue. So it's a blend. We had this question yesterday, are there different formulas in different parts of the world? The only difference is in the flavor system that is used according to various regulations in various parts of the world. But essentially, the core formula are these plant extracts that are all designed, they're all documented to support various aspects of stem cell function in the body. So really what the product does, simply to support this natural process every day of your life of putting more stem cells in circulation that your body can use for tissue repair. That's what your body has done from the day you're born. It will do it until the day you die. And in between, more stem cells in circulation simply means that you will be in a better ability to maintain your health. Thank you so much.